Hi guys, it's Resin Bell. Thank you for coming back to my channel. Today I'm going to be working on some coasters, and I'm going to be showing you a pretty much fail-proof way to um, encase paper into resin. Now, a lot of times if you don't seal paper properly, you will get dark marks, like the resin will soak into your paper unevenly and you'll get splotches and dark spaces, and it will really ruin if you're trying to seal a photo or a drawing or a printout. Like, it will ruin your design and you will have wasted a lot of your resin. So today I'm going to be making some coasters and showing you the technique that I use to seal paper that I very, very, very rarely have any problems with. The only time I ever have a problem is if I try to rush the process, or I don't do all the steps of the process. If I, try to cut corners, then I will almost always have a little dot or, a streak or something that ruins my project. And then, later I'm kicking myself because I didn't do what I usually do. So anyway, right now I'm just making up some coasters, and I've got this 3-pack of coasters that came from Michael's in their resin crafts section. And it comes with a square, a circle, and a hexagon. So, yeah, so, and then I was using up the rest of my resin. I poured too much resin, or made up too much resin. So I always have some molds nearby so I can pour off my extra resin and make some extra pieces. So I'm never wasting any of my resin. So I first did my glitter layer, and then this, it cured, and then now I'm adding like a colorful back to it. So now it's the demolding process. This is the favorite. Sometimes the favorite. Sometimes it's a disaster. It's just the way of resin, but most of the time this is the favorite part of resin, is the demolding. And I love all the glitter, all the sparkles. I'm loving how these turned out. They're just so sparkly, and they've got purples and turquoise and, pinks and whites and just all the sparkle. So I really love these glitters. I think these are going to work well for my project today. Okay, so I have printed out my logo on an inkjet printer, and now I'm just going to cut it out. Use Aleene's Original Tacky Glue. You can find this in most craft stores. You can probably find it at Walmart. I mean, you can find it in a lot of different places. It's a good, heavy-bodied, all-purpose glue. So just cut out your designs. And now I'm using a heat tool to seal, heat set the inks. You could also use an iron or any kind of heat source. Now I'm going to turn these over, and I am going to paint some tacky glue onto the backs. Now a lot of people will paint the surface that they're going to stick the paper to first and then stick the paper to it, but I find that it's better to paint the back of the paper and then stick it on with the glue, because it seals the back of the paper. You don't get any bubbles, you don't get any spaces where the resin can seep in. It's better to paint the glue directly onto the paper and then flip it over to glue it to your surface, because then you know that the back is fully sealed. You have painted a good even layer on the back. You don't have to have a lot, but you do want to make sure that all of the back is wet when you put it down on your project. If you have any dry spots, like if you start painting on one side and you get to the other side and the first side is dry already, you need to make sure that the entire surface is wet with glue. Any spaces where there is a dry spot will create a bubble behind your paper, and it won't stick to your project, and the resin could potentially seep into that point. So here I'm just making sure I've got a wet layer of glue on the back. I'm going over where the first part that I put glue on. So I've got a nice even layer that's still wet on the back, and I can place it on my resin coaster. Now when you push this down, you got to make sure you rub it really well to make sure that there are no air bubbles behind the paper. All the air bubbles are pushed out, and then you can push down on the paper, with your thumb or something, just to make sure that there is a good solid seal with no air bubbles all throughout your paper. Any place there are air bubbles behind your paper, between your paper and your project, is a space where resin could get in and ruin your project. Okay, so now that you've got your pieces glued onto your projects, you need to paint on a single layer of the Aleene's Tacky Glue. You want to make sure that when you're painting, you want to go in one direction across your whole project. The only exception is on the edges. You want to paint against all the edges of your paper. And the reason you want to do that is because you want a tiny bead of glue all the way around the edge of your paper to prevent resin from seeping in the edges of your paper. And that is sealing all the little fibers on the edge of your paper that you can't really see, but would really kind of wick in the resin. So you're making a very good seal all the way around all the edges of your paper from all directions, and then across the entire piece you want to paint in one direction, making sure that you have a nice even layer of glue, and then you want to let that dry thoroughly. Okay, so at this stage in your project, you've probably put in about 2 days worth of work waiting for resin to dry and cure, and then, printing out and painting on and waiting for your glue to dry and all that. And it is very tempting to let it stand at one coat of glue. And I would encourage you to think again, because most of my projects that I've had resin seepage into paper is because I rushed it and only did one layer of glue. Now here you can see that little bead of glue I was talking about around the edges, and that ensures that you have a nice seal around the edges of your paper and no resin is going to get in there. So this is just the first layer of resin, or first layer of glue, to seal all the paper. You can see I've got a very nice even coat. But even though I'm pretty sure it's completely sealed, there is always going to be that one little spot that ruins the project. So let that dry. See, now the first layer is dry, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint on a second layer of glue, and I'm going to do it in the opposite direction as the first one. The first one was left to right, and this one's going to be top to bottom. So this is a very important step in sealing your paper. And many people are going to say, you know what, I've used Mod Podge, I've used this and that, and I've only used one layer. I have used Mod Podge too, and I've had many more failures with Mod Podge than I have with anything else. And I think the reason is that Mod Podge is a lot more watery. It has a lot more water in it, and it seeps into the paper instead of laying on top as much and creating that barrier that you need for resin. So if you're really trying to make something nice, maybe you're trying to make a photo gift or something like that for someone, put your extra time in. It's only, only an extra maybe hour or so for that second layer of glue to dry, and it is so worth it. You're not going to have a failure. You're not going to have resin seep into the middle of someone's face and turn it black. It's going to turn out a lot better. It just is. So the resin, in photos, in pictures, whatever, it seeps into the actual paper, and it makes that paper a very dark color, and there is nothing you can do to fix it. It's ruined from that point. And sometimes it's just a tiny little spot and it's not that big a deal, or maybe it's just something for you and you don't mind. But if you're doing a gift or if you're doing something professionally, make sure you get that really good seal on your paper before you pour any more resin on top, and you will be happy with the results, I promise. So at the end of this project, you'll see that I've done 3 different ones, and every single one of them have turned out with no dark spots and no resin seepage. So this is a really good way to make sure that this is going to work for you. Okay, yeah, so this is what they look like after both coats of glue have dried. You can see it's a very smooth finish, and there's no spots where there's, missing glue or uneven layers, etc. So this is a perfect time to mix up some clear resin to pour over the top. And I'm using Amazing Clear Cast because it is my favorite resin. It's pretty much foolproof. I've never had a problem with Amazing Clear Cast not curing right, or whatever. And I'm not the greatest. I'm pretty good at measuring it out, but sometimes it's not perfect, and this is pretty forgiving as far as a resin goes. So now we're just going to pour a very thin coat of the clear cast resin over the top, because I still want that indentation for the coaster to catch any kind of condensation from my drinks and such. So very thin coat is all you need, kind of like doming a piece almost. And then you just let that cure. Okay, they are cured and have no spots, no leakage, no resin seepage into my paper. Everything turned out great. Not even the smallest pin spot of resin seepage. So out of 3 different projects, this process works really well. So now I'm just going to file off the rough edges on the bottom sides, and then I'm going to be done with this project.